So neutral territory is pretty important in terms of where you're meeting. So places like restaurants and the library, the learning center, are better choices than going to somebody's house because it's easy to get distracted there too.
Okay, so that the first four steps are just so students can really understand the importance of a study group and ways to think about how to form one, how to schedule one, and things like that. The next five steps are really about the study group itself and how that product gets produced. So, step five is knowing your study group style. All of you need to agree on this before you get started. In a classroom, a teacher knows exactly how they're going to teach. So, there's consistency throughout the semester so that students know exactly what to expect. What happens in a study group is that consistency is never discussed. So sometimes, you've got people who are talking about the mall, and sometimes you've got people who really are there and very, very focused. But to say that this is how we're going to do it every single time, make sure that students A know to take it seriously and B know what to expect. So if it's not a study group that works for them, they can find another one. We have outlined three types of styles. There's lots of styles. There's lesson oriented, question oriented, and discussion oriented. Lesson oriented is when the study group sort of acts like a classroom. You have one teacher who explains everything. Question oriented is when students come in with questions and they basically just answer each other's questions for the entire study group. And discussion oriented is what we like to think of as a mixture of the two. Instead of one person doing a whole chapter, perhaps you have all five people choosing different sections and asking questions about those other sections. It's a really good way to make everybody involved every time. Step six, and this is what I think we've actually puzzled on not calling them study groups because study groups give the impression that you come in cold, study here, and then you leave ready to go. And that's not an effective way to create a study group. The most effective study groups are when students come in prepared, and this is something that they all forget to do. So you should come in prepped before you even start the study group. And prep also teaches you to think like a teacher. If you know you're going to be in a room and people are waiting for you to talk, then perhaps you will find something to say. And while you're finding something to say, you're also relearning that material over and over again as you're learning it, to talk to other people. You're learning it yourself, and then you talk, and so it's a very effective method. And I just went really roundabout there, and I apologize. So there's stuff to consider in prep. Think like a teacher. Don't be afraid to go backwards. Be prepared to be the tutor on at least one subject. What we've learned by working in the Learning Center is that our students learn better when they're teaching. So even if you're not great with everything, just be an expert on one thing and really understand that one thing. So when we get there, that's when you know what to talk about. And also, it's important to come with at least one trick of the trade. We call those memory tools, a cool video you found. This encourages students to be creative and proactive rather than just waiting for the information to wash over them. Um, it pushes passive learning out of the way and makes them an integral part of the system. And this is where we really get into creating product that can be graded. So there's four roles in a study group. There's the taskmaster, the official note taker, the timekeeper, and the quiz maker. And these people are producing things that will then be organized into a notebook that can be graded.
So the taskmaster, my favorite job. The taskmaster is the person who does exactly what it sounds like, who keeps people on track. This is something students don't always think that they need. There's a danger here. The taskmaster, since this is the person who's responsible for materials, so they will be taking notes, they'll be making sure people have handouts, that type of thing. There's a danger here that this person ends up being the only person prepping for the group, and that's why we've divided it into other different roles. Because sometimes you see study groups where you have definitely one person who provides the information, keeps track of the information, plans the study group. It just becomes too much responsibility for one student, and that's when resentment starts to develop and the group starts to disintegrate. So this person is just responsible for figuring out what we need before the meeting to make sure everybody's on the same page.
next task is the official note taker. Everyone should be taking their own notes in their own shorthand throughout the study group, but there should be one official set of notes of things that happen that can get emailed out to each student. This is really the first part of what will go into the notebook. And as these official notes are being taken, a form of organization is happening where students are making connections between what the note taker did last time and what the note taker did this time. And students can choose to have their roles for the entire time, or they can choose to rotate roles, which we suggest so that everyone kind of gets a feel for what needs to be happening in each study group and everyone feels equally responsible.
Okay, and then there's the timekeeper, which sounds like a really easy job because students will assume that it just means making sure that we have an eye on the clock. But the timekeeper, we've decided, has much more to do than that. This is the person who tries to keep us on topic, which happens in study groups a lot. People get off topic. This is the person who decides when we've rehashed this topic too much, we need to move forward and make sure we cover the whole study guide. But this is also the person who needs to pay really close attention to how the group is doing. So if people are getting really discouraged, do we need to take a break? Do we need to remind ourselves that we've done really well on something else so we can kind of boost the morale? And finally, this is the person who's responsible for pulling people into the group who maybe have veered off. Maybe there's a quiet person who isn't talking, who just needs someone to ask them a direct question. Or maybe there's a person who's kind of zoned out and needs to be reminded, hey, we're talking about something important here. So the timekeeper really has a variety of jobs in addition to making sure that we get through all the material.
The last role is the quiz maker. The quiz maker will take all the information that was done in the study group and after each session provide a quiz of the issues that were discussed in the group. This is another way to produce a product. And it also, because they're suggested to date notes and date quizzes, which seems like something that's really obvious and doesn't make that much of a difference, but it makes a huge difference, not just for them knowing when things occurred, but for when you go to your instructor and you say, I'm confused, the instructor doesn't have to say, well, what are you confused about? And you just get this blank look. The student can say, on Monday of this week, we talked about this, and this made me confused because the dates are right there. The quiz maker, because it's after every session, is creating a study guide. So instead of we have to go through all our notes and all our books and all these things, you have already asked all the questions that your teacher would ask, hopefully, in these quizzes. So really you can just make sure you can do the quizzes and keep going. These roles seem relatively obvious and they're all equally important, but because of the nature of students, if they are not forced into a role that has a defined, product to produce, you find those students, even good students, kind of fading into the background and again having that passive learning that we really want to avoid. The wonderful thing about study groups and how they differ from class is that they aren't passive. You're not allowed to sit. But we see that happening more and more because one person, and that person was usually me, and I'm sure because we're all in academia, that person was usually us. That one person wants everything to go so well that they take care of everything and become a teacher of sorts. And these roles really make sure that that doesn't happen. And they try to encourage a type of learning that you can take even into the classroom. Again, this is a reminder, prep for the study group. These are really, really important. We cannot stress this enough. So step 8 is where we take, printouts of all those emails, printouts of the quizzes, printouts of the notes, and we put them into a binder that we can then not only share to study for finals and midterms and things like that, but that we can turn into our instructor, as this is the product of our study group. This is proof that we planned, that we were organized, that we created quizzes. Here's what we were studying. And I think this can also be useful to instructors as well, because you get to see, rather than just an abstract, okay, well, they all missed this question, you get to see firsthand what students are focusing on. This is what my students think I'm looking for. What may have given them this impression? And how do I lead them to where I need them to be. There's also a couple hints that we add on. So,
such as bringing snacks to the study groups. First of all, we've learned in the Learning Center, people will do things if you bring food. People will pay more attention if there is food, as long as we're not talking lots of heavy, distracting, or difficult to eat type of food, which is why made suggestions about things that are probably obvious, but finger food and somewhat healthy stuff, things that will keep people fueled during the study group.
And there's also hints for those people who, their teacher said, well, you have to be in a study group, but they're quiet or shy, and they don't feel like they can necessarily bring to the study group what everyone else does. So just some helpful tips for students like that. Volunteer to make PowerPoints beforehand. You can find videos that express really interesting things that you might not want to express in the group, but you might want to email out a couple links. You can go to your instructor and you can be kind of like the instructor liaison if you're not that comfortable talking to the group. And you can pipe in gradually, promise yourself I'm going to speak once during each session. And then maybe once you get comfortable, you'll speak more and more and more.
This is good also for the people who are quiet. It's good that they have a distinct role. As a person who would have been quiet in a study group, believe it or not, I would have been much more likely to talk if I knew what I was responsible for, so that ahead of time I could think about exactly what I'm going to say to the group, and then I wouldn't be so nervous when I was talking to them.
We can't see what's getting typed. We're trying, but something is going wrong. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, we're getting to that, Robert. Thank you.
What if I'm too talkative? Which is me. Yay, team. So overly talkative people can also be an issue, and you don't think you're being an issue because you just want to help and you're really excited. But if you're like me, you realize that you're taking over the group and it's not really healthy for the other people. So we suggest that you limit yourself to a certain amount of comments per session, or limit yourself to only commenting on specific topics. Like if I am not absolutely sure I know this topic better than anybody else, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Another thing that I was taught to do was count to 10 before I speak to allow other people time to get their thoughts in there. It's more important than you would think. And just to always remind yourself that a study group only works if everybody's working. Otherwise, you might as well just be studying by yourself.
Michael's also very good when she needs to talk at asking me questions. Lots and lots and lots of questions. So that's something I also tell talkative students. If you must say something, find the person who's not talking and ask them something.
So the last slide and the last thing that we advise, and it's the same thing that we tell our tutors about grades and the study group. You have to think Fight Club. You don't talk about grades ever in a study group. The idea of a study group is to encourage each other, and always be, proactive, and it's not a competition. And when a study group becomes a competition, you end up withholding information and the sharing stops. So we just like to put that out there so students know what's going on, and are very, very clear on what we expect from them. I feel that the more clear you are with students, the better your process is going to be. So thank you guys for coming. And if you have any questions, we'd love to hear them, or read them rather. So thanks. Multiple attendees are typing. We can deliver the workshop to students. The question is, do you deliver the workshop directly to students? We hope to get in as many classes as possible, but part of the beauty of the PowerPoint is that a teacher could put it on their content in Momentum. Thanks, Dr. Who. And, just say, refer to this, and I expect it to happen, and just do a brief thing in the in class. Of course, you can get a copy of the PowerPoint. If you would text, write your last name so we can get it to you, we'd be happy to send it to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. We'll post it everywhere.
It'll be everywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
That was our guest. Thank you.
Yeah.
We will get that to you as soon as the webinar is over. Thank you very much.
Yes, who is Doctor Who? That would be nice.
I'm putting my money on Jude.
Yeah, we think it's Jude.
So thank you
Thanks,
very
everybody.
much. Okay, so we are going to rewind a bit because we accidentally started recording relatively late. So we're going to go over the first three slides, which, lucky for me, are all on Jeff. So basically, the study group starter kit was a way to create for study groups to create a product that the teacher can grade. It's a variation of the organized notebook. So basically, at the end, which you've already seen, you will see that through the production of roles and carefully timed study groups, you can produce something that you can turn in for a grade. So you can, instead of just saying, hey, it'd be a great idea if you guys got in a study group, you can now incentivize the use of study groups in your classes.
All right, so the first step was, when do you function best? A lot of times students don't consider what time of day they're able to study most effectively. They just know what times they have available when they're not in class. They don't seem to notice what classes they are more likely to doze off in or pay more attention to. And sometimes that just has to do with the time of day. So to encourage them to form the study group at their best time of day is a good idea. And so we've broken it down into lots of time slots so that it makes students really aware of when they feel they're at their best, and so they can find other people who have the same preferences. Okay, step 2 is, what times are you available? And this sounds like a simple question again, but to our students who are working and have children and doing 5 million things, this can be really complicated. So what we suggested is, rather than just saying, here's when I can, here's when I can't, making sort of a traffic light system here of red, yellow, and green, where the students mark out when they can't meet and when they would prefer to meet or prefer not to meet. Because that way we can define not only times where you absolutely cannot be there, but also times where you might be a little bit late, or sometimes you might not be able to be there. We hear students complain about members of their study groups not showing up or always being late, leaving early. So this sort of tries to eliminate that if possible, and it helps them identify, once again, other people who can meet when they can meet. And this just, is just a way to break it down. If you filled this out and used those red, yellow, and green colors, then students would be able to easily visually see when they were available in comparison to other people. And to finish this step, we also want to emphasize to students, again, seems obvious, but emphasize the importance of committing to this as though it is a class. Study group is not, when I'm panicked right before the exam, I will show up and try to cram everything into my head. Study group is something you do regularly. It's part of your regular schedule, and all the students can hold each other accountable for that, which is something they constantly need to be reminded of. Okay, good. All right, so we have recapped for you. Sorry about the technical difficulties there.
Again, because we obviously missed introducing ourselves on the recording because we are talented and wonderful that way. This is Michael Hudson, the Learning Center Specialist on the Harriman campus.
And I'm Jessica Millis, the Learning Center Specialist on the Oak Ridge campus.
If you found this video confusing in any way, and honestly, why would you? Feel free to email one of us, and we'd happily email you a copy of our PowerPoint, and or just come talk to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.